Alright, like I did in the last class, I kind of gave a version 1 of a schedule that I hope that we can follow pretty much. We'll see. Well, again, we'll see how it goes. My plan is to go over Chapter 2 today, Chapter 3 on Thursday, then next week 4 and 5, then give you your first assignment at the end of next week. You'll have lab the entire following week. Then, as you can see, we'll follow 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then have another lab. Then I am going to go over chapters 12 through 17 and chapter 24, but there won't be any homework on 12 through 17. That's the database stuff. So by that time, that'll get us to around week 12, and then we'll get into the model view controller stuff. We'll be working on a project as a class. We'll ideally get to a point where we'll do about 75% of it as a class, and then you'll finish the rest up on your own. So your grades will all be based off of that assignment, and an MVC project. All right, just so you're aware of all that stuff. All right, so if you're not in the virtual desktop, please get into the virtual desktop. If you are in the virtual desktop, please start up Visual Studio if you've not already done so, and let's start up a new project. I know we talked about last time I had you create that project. Just forget that, because what they actually have you do in here is, so I'm going to do a file new website, and I am going to make an empty one. All right. And I'm just going to call it chapter CH2 future value. And I am going to save everything I'm working on today, so when I get done at the end of the period, it'll all be out there. But I want to go through some of the stuff that they talk about in chapter 2, which is, again, building this future value project that we already have. Please look up on the screen here. Remember, when you do this, you want to make sure that you're setting it onto your desktop, all right, ideally, and it'll create there's not a folder out there now that's called CH2 future value, so it'll create one. Make sure it's empty, and make sure that the web location you choose is file system, not HTTP and not FTP. And also, of course, make sure your language is Visual C#. Any questions on anything that's on this page? All right, well, then you may have to restart it. All right, we'll give you a second. So again, in the book, and I'm not going to spend, I don't want to sit there and spend all this time going over that junk that's in the book, but in the book, in chapter 2 on page, or it's around page 32, in here on page 32, they come in and they explain what I just had you do. In other words, the system, they come in here and they talk to you about what choosing file as opposed to choosing HTTP as opposed to choosing FTP. That's all explained in here. I went over it with you, not in a whole lot of detail, but I did go over it with you. And if, again, so what we're doing is the empty project. All these stuff that you say here, they said chapter 02. I guess I forgot the 0, sorry. And websites, web form sites versus web form application. All right, last semester we chose basically web forms that we were doing. Now we're doing a website. All right, as they say in here, here's the explanation of file system, of HTTP, and of FTP. All right, so I'm not going to go over that stuff. So if you've done what I asked you to do, all right, and you could do all this, and I guess it's CH02 there, and I click OK, that should create a brand new empty website for me that has in it only a web.config file, and there should be a folder on my desktop someplace, CH02 future value. Everybody see that? And you'll notice there's really and truly not much in it right now. So we'll add more stuff to it, of course, as we go on. All right, so right now it doesn't look like much because there's not much in there. Everybody's with me, correct? All right, so on page 34 they tell you how to add a web form for the site, and that's what I'm going to do. So you right mouse click where it's got the name of the project, CH02 future value, right mouse click, we choose add, we come over to new item. So right mouse click on the project name, add new item. When you click Add New Item, the first thing that's in there, or one of the first things that's in there, if we look long enough for it, is web form. All right, everybody see that? Notice it's called default.aspx. I think that's a silly name, but that's the one that they tell you to use in the chapter, so I'll just use that one. Okay? Please look up on the screen here. I mentioned this the other day, but I'm trying to go over it again for completeness. Until we get to about Chapter 8, do not, repeat, do not select master page. So don't check this. Have it unchecked. If you do check it, the system's going to ask you on the next screen, what master page do you want to link it to? Now, going the other way, just so you know, this is from Microsoft's documentation, not from me. If you go in and you create a file that you wanted to put in a master page, but you forget to put it in a master page, there's a bunch of directives you can add, but even Microsoft recommends you just remove the form and redo it. Because to go from one to the other, it's just too problematic. So I'm going to keep it as default, place code in separate file, and I'm going to click Add. Now they show you how to add a new item and how to add a new web form on page 35 in the book. I just showed it to you. All right. And next they tell you how to use Visual Studio on pages 36 and 37. Come on, you already know how to use Visual Studio. All right, remember if you look up on the screen here that we're currently in source mode. There's design mode, which doesn't show much because there's not much there right now. We can go to split mode if we want. We can go to source mode. All right, so this is where we are right now. So they tell you how you can add folders and add files to a website. You know, all the stuff that's in here in the book. How to work with Visual Studio. It's kind of what I just showed you. That's in the book on pages 36 and 37. On page 38, they show you how to add folders and how to add files. I just showed you how to add a file. I'm going to do this now just so you see it. All right, everybody hear me? I'm doing this just so you see it. You don't have to do what I'm about to show you. You do not have to do this. But let's pretend in this program we were both A, going to create a C# class, and B, create a database. You with me? So we're pretending we were going to do those. So I again would right mouse click on here and I would choose Add, but I would choose instead of Add New Item or New Folder, I'd choose Add ASP.NET Folder. If I do that and I choose App Code, it'll create an App Code folder for me. That's where you put your classes, all of your .cs files that don't have a user interface associated with them. You'll see them in a chapter or two. All right? So let's also suppose I wanted to come in here and I wanted to add a database. I again right mouse click, choose Add, Add ASP.NET Web Folder, and this time I will choose, instead of, bless you, App Code, I'll choose App Data. That's where you put your databases. Bless you. Everybody see what's on the screen right now? So App Code is where you'll end up putting your classes. App Data is where you'll end up putting your databases. In here, and you all can do this now, is we can right mouse click on here, choose Add, and choose New Folder. Not New ASP.NET Folder, just New Folder. All right? So again, I right mouse clicked on the name of the project, chose Add, and I'm choosing New Folder. And that's where we will, in here where it says New Folder, I'll put in images. And that's where we'll add that Muroc image in just a bit. All right? So yours probably doesn't have the app code, probably doesn't have the app data. If I'm not going to use this and I don't want it anymore, I can right mouse click on it, choose Delete. It will warn me. If I say OK, it's gone. I can do the same thing with app data. And boom, that's gone. All right, so hopefully now your program looks like mine does. All right. So on 38 and 39, they show you on 38 and 39 how to add folders and files. So we've gone over that as far as I can tell. We've gone over that now. All right. On page 40, they tell you how to open or close an IIS Express website. We're not working with IIS Express. All right, so I'm going to skip 40 and 41. Okay, I'm just going to skip that. On 42, how to convert a file system to an IIS Express. We don't have to do that either because we're not doing that. So I'm moving all the way up page 44. Now, please look up on the screen here for just a second. Okay? I click there, save all, and I'm purposely going to close this now because I want to show you something. You don't have to close yours, but I want to show you something. All right? So I'm going to click Close Solution. I think everybody would agree I'm out. In fact, I'm going to totally close Visual Studio. Totally close it. So now I'm going to start up Visual Studio again. And I'm going to show you the way that I would recommend that when you get to this point, you always open your projects in here. It's not exactly mentioned like this in the book, but to me, what I'm about to show you is the easiest way of doing it. All right? So I'm just going to click File, Open, Website. Then I've got to find it. All right? And on my screen, you'll notice I've got CH202 future value. What you don't want to do is open that. All right, you can leave it closed. You just click on the folder name and then click Open. That's the easiest way to open your projects. Now, if you find a different way, if you'd rather do it from the Start menu and you can, if it works, then by all means do that. I have never had a problem doing it this way. I'm just telling you, that's why I'm recommending that you do it in the way I just showed you. Again, if you don't agree, then you can try a bunch of different ways and see which one you like the most. All right? So, I'm on page 44, how to use Visual Studio to build a web form. All right, I'm going to bring back up my ASPX file. Remember, if you look up on the screen here, so that's my form, and if I click on the arrow here, that's the associated C# that goes with it. I can open them both up and then bounce back and forth between them, just like that. That's how easy it is. All right, so I'm on page 44 now in your book. And here it says how to use Visual Studio to build a web form. How to enter the HTML for a web form. The key things to realize here as I turn to the next page on page 45 is, again, IntelliSense will kick in. There's also something that exists on here that's called snippets. Not going to go over that. I did last semester and people found it confusing. All right, so you can go through that if you want to and look at it yourself. What snippets do is they stick a template in there of what it is you're about to key in. Some people didn't like it because you had to remove stuff and then add your stuff to it. So they just as soon enter it themselves and use the IntelliSense. Okay, but either way will work. Everybody got that? Either way will work. All right, what I'm try to, all right, you heard me say try to. What I'm going to very quickly try to do here is something I should have done before class but didn't. I'm going to go to the Fall 14 folder, source code, and I already did this student download, but I'm going to come over here, book applications, chapter 2, future value, images, Muroc logo. There it is. I'm going to copy that, and I'm literally going to right now throw that onto the P drive for this class, right under the P drive for the class. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm on the P drive for the class, and I'm literally throwing there that Muroc logo. You may have done this before, but I'm trying to make it as easy for you to get to as possible. All right? Does all that make sense? We haven't added the image control yet, but I want to add first the image, the logo image, to my folder. Did I say anything? Did I confuse anybody right there? Again, if you look, what I just did was I copied the logo that we're going to need, and I copied it to right there. And we'll all grab it from there and we'll just insert it into our program. All right? Rather than in our program, we'll first just insert it into our folder, our images folder. Now I'm taking it for granted that since I said this before, everybody created an images folder. All right? So I'm coming back to the program then. All right? And in my images folder right there, I'm going to right mouse click, choose add, and choose existing item because it's already there. All right, so I right mouse clicked on the images folder, I chose add an existing item. Then I have to iterate my way over and find out where it is. So I'm going to come down here, grab my P drive, all right, so by clicking classes, work my way down here, find CIS, find 152, 161, Find fall 2014. All right, it should be right underneath here. Notice, though, it doesn't show it because I've got to click over here and choose all files. And there it is. Everybody see what I just did? Did I do that too fast? All right, so I'm going to click on the Muroc logo and choose Add. You'll know right away whether or not it worked because it's here. You could take and mouse right over it and it shows you the image, which we're about to actually put into our program in just a minute. All right. Again, I'm taking for granted there's no comments, nobody said anything, so I'm taking for granted that no one had any problem with what I just showed you. Where is it? It's out right here. It's on the P drive. Right there. If it doesn't show in yours, where you've got, if it doesn't show in there, you've got to click down there and choose all files, and then you should be able to find it. All right. You can do that too. Yeah. Again, as you'd guess, there's a multiple number of ways of doing most of this stuff. I'm trying to show you the way that I think is probably the most intuitive for people to work with. If that way works better for you, that day, go for it. That's not a problem. All right. So I'm taking it now that everybody's got that file. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to do this in design mode. I like to see what it is I'm working on. I also like to have my toolbox pinned. Remember this from last semester, how you could pin the toolbox? So I'm going to pin my toolbox there. I'm going to go and find image, and I'm going to drag it right up onto here. All right, so I'm going to put the image up on the top there. We did this the other day, so hopefully it's not a big thing for anybody. Okay? Then with my image highlighted, I mean, I could change the name. It's image 1. If I want to, I can change the name to image Muroc logo, which probably would be a good idea. But I mean, if there's only one image in the program, you could make a case and say you really don't have to change the name. It's not that big a thing. But I've changed it anyway. And I'm going to go all the way down and find image URL in my properties. Everybody see where I am here? I'm going to find image URL. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to click on the ellipsis. All right. And it says you're about to add an image. Where do you want to add it from? I have to double click on my images folder. There it is. And I click OK. Boom. That a problem for anybody? Make sure that what you've got highlighted is the image control, and you should be able to iterate your way down and find image URL. I mean, it's alphabetized. If yours looks different, you might have to click the AZ here. If you look up here, if yours looks different, you want it alphabetical. And make sure that indeed, again, the image control is the one. And choose image control, not image button and not image map. You want just the one that says image on it. If you chose image button or image map, that won't work correctly. All right, the next thing that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to stick in the H1 tag. All right, we're supposed to stick in the H1 tag. Now, again, we'll talk about on Thursday another way of doing this, but now I'm going to switch back to source mode in here. Notice it put in 2 BR tags for me. And I'm going to put in an H1 tag. And it's going to say, I forgot what this said, so here's the picture. 401k future value calculator. 401k future value calculator. All right, and when you get done, it should look like that. And don't worry right now if you say, well, it's if I make it wide enough, it'll all show on the screen. And I'm going to hit enter after I do that, so I'm down here. Any problems with anything we've done so far? Yeah. You want to make sure that all that source that you're putting into is all within your div tags, and of course within your form tags, and of course within your body tags. Again, if you have any problems with this, what I'll do is I'll save this halfway through and stick it out on the P drive under a folder with today's date on it, and I'll do that at break. And you can use that one if you need to. All right? Everybody's caught up? All right. So again, ideally when you get done, this is what your screen's going to look like. I'm not worried right now about putting the CSS in to make the 401 turn blue. We can do that later. That's not really and truly is not a big thing. So what I'm showing you right now is all of the material that's in your book on pages 44 and 45. All right? Again, all I'm doing is just walking you through the stuff that's in here, the stuff that's in your book. So you're not turning this in. This is more meant to be a practice program. In fact, all the ones we do in class will be practice programs. So I'm not going to mandate that you turn them in. When you get your assignment, it'll tell you what to do and what you have to turn in. All right? So if you're following along in the book, I'm up to page 46. I'll wait for just a second, but we're up to page 46. Again, we've got to go up to about, I don't know what it is, around through page 70 or 71. Yeah. So we'll you know, even if, you know, we'll catch up. We'll get it all done. And it's totally legit, just so you know when you're doing this. Notice it's kind of hard to read because I had to stretch stuff out. You could, just like in HTML, which is what this is, we can put this on separate lines. It's not a problem at all. So if that makes it easier for you as you're going through, there are a lot of people like to do that. That didn't sound good. Good time to save, right? Let's do a file. Everybody do a file save all. That'd probably be a fine idea. Or do a file save. How's that? Just do a file save. Well, when they said it was going to be out of here in 15 minutes, looks like they were wrong. So. Everybody's caught up now, correct? All right, so I'm moving back into design view. All right. Now, we're up to page 46, how to add a table onto a form. Okay? Now, if you look over here, there is a table tag. Everybody see that? So you can go in and literally, I'm not going to do this, but I can click, drag a table right over to there. I can do that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. I would suggest when you do this, this is my suggestion, follow it or not, that's your call. But I would suggest that what you do is instead have your mouse positioned where you want it to be, go back into source mode, and take a look at what's in there. This is another way you can do it. If you're happy manually putting the table in, because we're going to create a table with 6 rows and 2 columns, then do it that way. But probably the easiest way is to go into design, and up here, notice it's not here. There's nothing. Oh, I guess I thought it wasn't here, but I guess it is. All right. No, it's not. There's nothing here that says table when I'm in the source mode, but when I click design, there's table. See that? So I'd suggest you do it from here. Click on table and insert table. Okay, the question was, do you want it in the div? It really and truly, the div is part of the container, which is part of the whole thing. It's not a big thing. We can always move it later if it turns out that that's wrong. But we want it to be 6 rows, so you can either arrow up or manually change it. So we want 6 rows and 2 columns. This is your time if you want a border, if you want to pretty it up, if you want to play with colors, if you want to choose padding, spacing, background, you can do all that stuff. That to me is not what this class in here is about. That's what a CSS class is about. All right, so I'm literally just going to keep it at 6 rows, 2 columns, take all of the defaults, all right, and I'm going to click OK. And there's my table. All right, you can see it. You can go and arrow over any of the 2 columns and any of the 6 rows. And also notice now when I go back into source mode, you can pretty easily tell what it created for me. Everybody see that? Now notice, I said this the other day, I'm saying it again, it doesn't create table headers for you. It assumes everything you're putting in the table is tabular data. So if you want headers, you have to manually change the TD to a TH or add TD or TH tags rather. All right? Okay, so we've done now the work that's on pages 46 and 47. All right? Now, a couple things just so you know, because starting on page 48, if I'm in the table like this, notice right now where I am. I'm right here, right? So notice in my properties window where I am. If I decided I wanted to set a property, I would be setting it for this table data. So for that piece of data. If I click on table, notice how it changes the table. All right. Also notice, especially for table, that there is something in here. We talked about this the other day. Come on. All right. That we can set up classes. Notice it's right now set up to auto style. But we can set up our own class for the table too, our own CSS class. I'm not worried about that right now. So I'm not worried about any of that stuff. Okay? What we are going to do, and again, you can do it from source mode, you can do it from design mode. But again, notice there's our table. And what we're told to do here is we want 4 labels. So label here, label here, label here, label here. This be blank, and a button here. Everybody cool with what I just said? So label, 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 blank, and a button. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm literally going to go out there and drag those labels right there into my table. All right, the 5th one's blank, and the 6th one will have a button in it. I'm not worried right now over the fact that when we get done with this, it won't be pretty. All right, it'll be fine. Okay, so I've got my 4 labels, and I've got my button. And again, in row 5, there's nothing there. They just put that there for a little bit for the sake of being able to see what's in there and just a little bit of spacing, I guess. All right. Then what we're supposed to put in the 2nd row. Now notice, if I want to, please look up on the screen here. I can come in here, and I can do that. See what I did? I just basically made it more narrow. So I can do that if I want to. That's not a problem. Now, again, what I want to do in this 1st row right here is I want to go in and put a drop-down list. In the 2nd and 3rd rows, I want to put in text boxes. In the 4th row, I want to add another label. And finally, in the 6th row, I want to add another button. So right now, that's what my interface looks like. And again, I'll come right back to it, but if I go into source mode, you can see the stuff has been added for me. So you can always go back and pretty that up if you want to. All right. Also, please notice, if you don't look up on the screen here, notice table data. They even have some auto-style classes set up for it. Don't even worry about that. Some of that stuff will get set up for you as you go in and start tweaking stuff, making something narrower or wider, etc. We don't really even care about it right now. All right? So I'm going to go back to design mode, and not a bad time. It's 10:34, so I'm going to come in here and actually change the text to what I want this to be. Again, I can change it here. All right, I can right mouse click and choose it and just start clicking on it, but probably the easiest way is to go back into source mode. If you don't agree, then don't do it that way. All right, so I'm going to come in here and pretty this up a little bit just so it's easier for me to look at on the screen at one time. All right, so I'm going to set the text in here. This is the first one, and it's supposed to be monthly investment. Monthly investment. And I'm going to change the ID from label 1 to label monthly investment. So when I get all done with that, I'll come right back to it. I can go back to design mode and immediately see my change. All right, so I'm going to quickly change all these. So there's the first one. I'm going to just change them all, though. I might as well. They're all up here right now anyway. All right. right, so there's my first label, and there's my drop-down list. All right. Again, you're not turning this in, so if you say, I'm not even going to change the names, then don't. But you can't say, so if you get a job and you're an ASP.NET programmer and you don't change the name of your controls and your boss calls you in, please don't say to him or her, well, my teacher never did, because that would be a lie. All right. So I'm going to come down to the second one. Same kind of thing. The text for the label in the second row is annual interest rate. And since I call the label annual interest rate, I'm going to call the associated text box annual interest rate. Again, I'm just shooting for some consistency here. If I'm going too fast, you have to stop me. All right, so that's the second row. So notice now if I switch back quickly to design mode, all right, it's starting to get some semblance of order to it. It's still not great, but it doesn't look bad. All right. So what you see right here is what I've added thus far. All right. Again, it's a little wordy or a little verbose almost because I put some extra line breaks and stuff in it because I wanted to make it easier for all of you to read. And that's the two that we just added right there. All right. The third row has got number of years, and that's a text box. So I'm going to again do the same thing. Label number of years. And the text will be number of years. And the name of the associated text box will also be text box number of years. So that's my third row of stuff. And again, if I go back to design mode, you'll see how that's set now. So now the only thing that are left is my fourth row and renaming my buttons. And again, if I've confused you or you don't like it, remember that if you do look in your book on page 61, the same code is shown there. All right. So I've done all that. I'm ready to go up to the fourth row. And again, that fourth row has got in it future value. So that will be label future value. All right. And again, its text will be future value. All right. Now, we do have a little bit of an issue right here because in this row, there's two labels. And I've already named one of them label future value. All right. So there's a lot of ways around this. I can just call it future value. I can call it whatever I want. And that's the easiest way. So I'm literally just going to call this one. Maybe that's breaking protocol, but I'm just going to call this what it is, future value. All right, I'm going to do another file, save, my ASPX file. I'm going to go back to design mode, and you see it's, it's just about finished now. All right, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't want text there. That's my fault. I got to get rid of that. So where you've got the text, that should be blank. Sorry. So right now, again, just about finished right now. Okay, and it doesn't look that different from that handout I gave you or what you're seeing in your book on page 49. So the last thing that we want to do is we want to come in here, we want to change our buttons. Our ID of our buttons and what's actually written on the buttons. Okay, I guess I tabbed over. The one button that's in here says on it calculate, and the other one says clear. So there'll be button calculate and button clear. All right, I've done that. I'm going to again save because it's not a bad time ever, especially with weather like this. So there's my app right now. All right, there it is. Again, it's not going to do anything if I run it. And remember, if I run it right now, if you look at what's in gray up on the screen, since we didn't put any text in there, by default, what Visual Studio does is it just gives you the name of the control. All right, but if I ran this right now, I'm not going to, but if I did, all right, it wouldn't show anything there. Okay, so we've got all that done. Am I okay in assuming everybody got that? There wasn't any problem. That was kind of okay. All right. So on 48 and 49, they have how to add a web server control to a web form and how to set properties. We just did that. All right. We'll take a break at 10:50. If Zane tells me it's 10:50, then we'll take a break then. All right. But before we do, just a couple quick things. Kind of important. All right. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. So we did that. We did that. All right. Whoop. All right. Common web server control properties on page 51. We talked a little bit about these last time, but notice the first one. Auto post back determines whether the page is posted back to the server when the value of the control changes. In English, what that's saying is you're about to make a change. Does that change have to be written back to the server, where typically what that's going to involve is either a partial or a full page refresh? You hear what I said? We talked about this last time. Remember, with our drop-down list, the only time we want that posted back to the server is the first time when we're filling up that drop-down list with 50, 100, 150, 200, etc. Other than that, we don't want to do it. Causes validation. Notice the default is true. Determines whether the validation specified by the validation controls is done when a button is clicked. Well, it's true because by default it assumes that anything you want to validate, you're going to put code in. All right, which is a pretty good assumption to make. Enable view state. We didn't look at this the other day. We are going to after the break. You're going to see the view state, which is one of the ways that you can control state, and it's done for you automatically. Okay? Most of the rest of the stuff that's in here, enabled, you'll know what that means. You can disable a control by setting enable to false. Height, so you can manually set height in your code while the program's running. You can manually set height in your source, or you can set height in your properties window. All right? ID, we've already talked about the fact that one thing about ASP.NET controls, all must have an ID, and the ID on each page of each control must be unique. We also talked about run at. Run at is what distinguishes a server control from a client-side control. All right? Tab index, if we really wanted to get nitpicky here, we could set our tab index. I had you guys do that last semester, those of you who had me for the C# class. All right, if you did have Denny for the class, I don't know what he did. Okay? Text is the text that's in there. Tooltip, I'm not going to worry about it. Stuff is visible by default. All right? And I've said this before. I've said this in my classes. You may have never heard me say this before. The recommendation that you'll find most times out online is if you don't want somebody to be able to do something with a control, but you want them to know the control is there, don't ever set visible to false. Rather, disable it by setting the enabled property to true. Because it can confuse the hell out of an end user to have stuff magically pop in and pop out. All right? Yes. Yes, you definitely could do that, yeah. You could disable whatever you wanted to. In fact, when you brought it up, you could, technically, you could disable the clear button because there's nothing to clear. All right? And there's all sorts, you can go online and read all sorts of stuff just in the same way. I don't know if you remember this, but for example, if you look, what I call that button control, I call them button clear, and the other one was button calculate. Well, in the olden days, like a couple years ago, Microsoft would have told you to call these BTN calculate and BTN clear. And maybe you use that, and if you did, it's okay. But That's considered web form style, or, you know, the old school style. Not if you're working with server-side processing. With server-side processing, Microsoft recommends that you use the type of control and then put the name on the end. Unless they've changed that in 2013, but that's how it was set up for 2012. So this is considered more older school, that's considered newer school. But that said, you'll still see both, sometimes both in the same application. Why? Because one developer might do some stuff, another one might do something else, or they just may not have been paying attention and did both ways. I don't really care which way you do it, but you should have a unique way to identify all your controls. All right, and width should be pretty obvious. If you're working with drop-downs, remember we worked with items before? All right, we did that last semester. Items.add, if you want to add something to a drop-down list, items.remove, and to remove all of it. All right, so there's different ways. Remember the difference between this stuff. The selected value is the value of the currently selected item. One of the things we're supposed to do in the clear routine here is you're supposed to set the index, I think it was, to 0. Mike last week, I'm not picking on him. It's easy because he's not here, but I'm not picking on him anyway. He set this, or the other day, he set the selected value to 0. And it didn't make any sense, so the system didn't do anything when he pushed his clear button. All right? And also remember that the index starts at 0. So technically an empty list is symbolic or symbolized by -1 for a selected index. Selected 0 gets you the first element that's in there. All right? All stuff I think we've talked about before. All right. So next, and we'll just look at this. We won't do this till after the break. But if we look at this, again, these will be the validation controls. So they give you the introduction. I've already talked to you about these before, but as it says, there's 5 controls that are validators. You've already seen these, so when we do it after break, it shouldn't be new. Not under standard, but under validation. These are your controls. There's a compare validator. Typically, when you use the compare validator almost exclusively, it's when you've got a password and a confirm password. So you want to confirm what they put in the confirm password box for what they put in originally. Custom validator, all right, if you don't have a validator that meets your needs, for instance, maybe you've got a part number that's got 2 digits, 3 numbers, and 2 more digits. So you can set that up. Range validator, so if I wanted to make sure that an age was between 1 and 125, for example. Regular expression. I mentioned to you the other day there are some built-in regular expressions for social security numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, but you can put in your own. All right, if you say, I don't know how to do that, we're going to do that somewhat in here, but we're going to do that a lot in the PHP class. Required field, which is the easiest one, that just says the field's required, and the validation summary. So the controls are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the controls. The summary is just literally that. It's a summary of the different controls. All right, it's just about 10:50. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 11. We're on page 52. All right? And if anybody had any problems, I'll be glad to save mine. But it sounds like no one did, so that's good.